Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The One True Barbecue, Fire, Smoke, and the Pitmasters Who Cook the Whole Hog, by Rien Fertel. Narrated by George Newbern. Introduction. A Dying Breed. Some people count sheep to lull themselves to sleep, but Ricky Parker counted hogs to remind himself of his own existence. Whole hogs, prodigious beasts, 180 to 200 pounds apiece, fed and fattened to his specifications, slaughtered at the local abattoir, head and offal removed and ready for roasting and smoking in his cinder-block pits. This is what Ricky called barbecue. Whole hog barbecue. The only barbecue that he and all of Lexington, Tennessee ever knew. The one true barbecue, a hog slow-simmered over hickory coals and ash, its flesh and fat and skin primed for the cleaver and chopping block after 20-plus hours, bathed in smoke and massaged by fire. He served 5, 10, as many as 24 hogs a day, every day but Sunday, sometimes running out of fresh meat for chopped barbecue sandwiches well before noon. Ricky couldn't say for sure how many hogs he'd prepped since 1976, when he began tending the pits at Scott's Barbecue, the year early Scott took the 13-year-old boy on as an apprentice and, eventually, son. It was immediately clear to Scott that no one could smoke hogs like Ricky. He was a pitmaster, body and soul, born to the rough trade. He would master pit, fire, and hog, shovel, sauce, and spice. He would master barbecue. The young Ricky could remain on his feet for 20 hours straight, cleaning the pits, stoking the fire, shoveling coals, smoking hogs, serving customers. And the customers liked Ricky. Courteous, handsome, a bit wild, dedicated to finishing the job and doing it well. Ricky would eat standing up. "I ate on the run," he liked to say, and rarely if ever slept for more than 3 hours a night. Sleep didn't come easy when you were cooking with live flame. He'd close his eyes and experience terror-filled dreams of his pit catching fire, his hogs rendered inedible, the Henderson County Fire Department arriving too late to save his smokehouse, which now lay a conflagrated heap of charred timbers and sheet metal. Ricky would rather stay awake to watch the fire. His eating and sleeping patterns, or lack thereof, remained constant through the summer of 2008, when I first watched Ricky Parker smoke a pig. At first sight of him, slender and gangly, his skin bronzed from working in close quarters to fire, I questioned how he could possibly find time even to dress himself, energy enough to shave that perfectly sculpted Van Dyke beard. 3 hours of sleep and working like this? How could he be standing? How can he be alive? But Ricky assured me that this was all a part of the whole hog pitmaster's life. He repeated a boast that he recited to just about everyone who came to interview him. "I got to buy 4 or 5 pair of shoes a year. I do a lot of walking, a lot of pacing." He told me that he was married to his work more than he was to his wives, past and present. He spoke in self-mythologizing tones. He was special, unoriginal, a dying breed. For all he knew, he was the last of the great pitmasters, a man who strove to smoke as many hogs as humanly possible. Ricky counted sleeping hours and shoes in pairs, but above all else, Ricky counted his life in hogs. Annually, beginning with my first visit in 2008, I'd make a pilgrimage to eat Ricky Parker's barbecue. Each year, as I ate my chopped pork sandwich, he'd tell me about a future date circled on his mental calendar. July 4th, 2013, the holiday weekend over which he aspired to cook 100 whole hogs. 100. Hardly an arbitrary number crudely culled from a beer-fueled backroom bull session, but the apogee of human achievement, the age of modern Methuselahs. In sports, the most notable of statistical achievements, 100, a symbol of perfection. 100 pigs, one pitmaster's dream. 3 digits worth of whole hogs, a century of swine. Ricky Parker knew with some certainty that no pitmaster, living or dead, had ever reached that number. Through a complex formula of weather data, gasoline prices, hog futures, and unemployment rates, Parker calculated that 2013 would be his year. He could stop counting hogs after this achievement. He could slow down, ease into retirement, pass the Pitmasters shovel off to his son Zach. He might even learn to sleep. But until then, he would keep on cooking, because no one could smoke hogs like Ricky. No one worked to make barbecue like this anymore. Few cared like Ricky Parker, the world's greatest pitmaster, the man who counted hogs to keep both himself and barbecue alive. Chapter 1. Hungry. I make my stand upon pig. Charles Lamb. Though I was born and raised in the South, I grew up entirely barbecue-less. My birthplace of Lafayette, Louisiana, the hub city of Cajun culture, occasionally harbored a franchise chain out of Texas or Tennessee, but none endured for very long, or, for that matter, served up any meat that any self-respecting Texan or Tennessean would deem to be quality barbecue. Louisianans, especially those in Cajun country, are a people raised on the hog but not barbecue. A few links of boudin, a pork, rice, and spice-filled sausage, best eaten still warm while sitting on the hood of your car or truck, is my favorite snack. We consume plenty of cured pork products like tasso, andouille, and smoked sausage. Although it's a disappearing custom, Cajun families still gather for a harvest season pig slaughter and curing called a boucherie that, accompanied by music, dancing, and too much alcohol, extends over a weekend. Elsewhere in Cajun country, men roast suckling pigs, called cochon de lait, or pig and milk in French, a rite of spring in a handful of small towns. Growing up in the suburbs, I hazily remember seeing a barbecue pit in the backyard of my family home, not that it saw much use. Neither of my two dads, my birth father nor my stepfather, fired up the Weber for a Sunday rack of ribs, much less to char-grill a hamburger, not that my two brothers and I were raised on a meat-free diet. Because my mother managed a steakhouse, we were a beef family, spoiled with the riches of steak. I worked as a busboy at a restaurant throughout my teenage years, and on a whim I can still conjure up the scent of seared steaks sizzling in pools of molten butter, as if the essence of beef had seeped into my skin. Throughout my college years, while living in New Orleans, on several occasions en route to concerts or to visit friends, I detoured through hellish Atlanta traffic for styrofoam takeout trays of charred and fatty bones from Fat Matt's Rib Shack. Later and further afield, I road-tripped to the hill country surrounding Austin with the sole intent of tasting a half-dozen or so sausages and beef briskets, each more fat-capped and smoke-ringed than the next, to round out a gluttonous vacation that was very nearly pleasurable enough to make me consider moving to Texas. Eventually, I moved up to New York for a graduate degree and dined at Blue Smoke, a posh Murray Hill area restaurant that covered the breadth of the nation's barbecue cultures, complete with a complimentary wine list. For me, barbecue, in all its forms, existed as a vague notion. Real barbecue truly remained a mystery, lingering, like smoke, at an intangible distance. But in the summer of 2008, I traveled throughout Memphis recording oral histories, capturing the narrative histories and the personal stories behind the food, as a freelancer for the Southern Foodways Alliance, a University of Mississippi-based organization devoted to, as their mission states, documenting, studying, and celebrating the diverse food cultures of the changing American South. I saw this documentary project as an opportunity to connect with my Southern roots. So there, in Memphis, I consumed as much barbecue as I could find, twice 3 times, and at least once 5 times in a single day. I gnawed on the famous dry-rubbed ribs at Charlie Virgo's Rendezvous, the downtown grande dame of barbecue restaurants. I snacked on barbecue nachos alongside college students at the crowd-pleasing Central Barbecue. I guiltily gulped down a terrible chopped barbecue sandwich at an indoor shooting range, where Second Amendment advocates took practice shots at paper targets printed with the face of Hillary Clinton. I ate all the only-in-Memphis specialties, barbecue rib tips, barbecue bologna sandwiches, barbecue Cornish game hens, and barbecue spaghetti. By the time I left Memphis, I liked barbecue. Certainly didn't love it, and had eaten enough of the stuff to think that I understood it. To riff on T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, I had known smoked sausages, briskets, porks. I could measure out my life with plastic sporks. The art of barbecued meats seemed simple enough, I thought. Meat, heat. But it was on a trip beyond the city to Seiler's old-time barbecue in Henderson, Chester County, Tennessee, that I realized that, concerning barbecue, I didn't know a damn thing. I arrived at the barbecue house just in time to catch the yellow, rust-worn Chevy pickup back into a gravel-lined gap between the kitchen and the pit house. A single pale pink trotter stuck out of the truck's bed, pointing accusatorially at the driver and the concealed carry weapon permit sticker on the back window. Ronnie Hampton dipped out of the cab and ambled toward me. He wore a camouflage baseball cap sunk low over half-open eyes and crooked nose. His tongue steadily rolled a toothpick, and he seemed to exist in a perpetual state of drowsy awareness that only old dogs can channel. He ignored my presence, my wide-eyed ogling of his truck's cargo, and unlatched the tailgate to reveal 3 hogs, stacked and shrink-wrapped in glossy black contractor-sized garbage bags. They looked so much like body bags, 3 mafia-dispatched corpses ready for disposal in New Jersey's Pine Barrens, that I had to remind myself that this was just barbecue. This is just barbecue. Except it was not the sort of barbecue I recognized to be barbecue. A rack of ribs smoking on the Weber grill, licking sugary sauce from sticky fingers. Baseball, backyards, and the 4th of July. This was an animal. Still bleeding, though just barely. I leaned in closer. Amidst a pile of spent Gatorade and beer bottles, a spare tire and a length of weed-whacker twine, each body bag imperfectly wrapped, or perhaps too small to hold a carcass, spilled out its contents of flesh and fat and blood. The hogs had been split along the spine, their internal organs and heads removed. The flabby neck meat, remaining attached to the right side shoulder, hung, flapping like a massive, fatty tongue against the truck's bed. Raw meat met rust. Sanguinary fluids merged with a decade's buildup of grease, tar, and mud. There's a reason geneticists and other biotechnologists believe that surgeons will soon be harvesting organs from genetically modified pigs for human transplantation. Inside and out, we are very much the same. These poor pigs looked remarkably human. Alive and breathing just a couple of hours ago, the hogs still radiated heat, adding unwanted degrees to an already steamy July morning. The flies had arrived before I did, buzzing back and forth between the skin, patchily jaundiced and cantaloupe-mottled, and the exposed flesh. Feasting. Chris Seiler came bursting out of the kitchen's back doors with a knife in hand. The new owner of Seiler's old-time barbecue here in Henderson, Chester County, Tennessee, was as lumbering as Hampton was whip-thin. Under a black chef's apron, he wore a red T-shirt and a pair of bright blue Wrangler overalls with oversized pockets. Dragging the first hog to the tailgate's lip, Seiler tore open the plastic wrapping. With the pig on its back, he used his left hand to pry open the cavity. Wiping the sweat from his face, he then gently ran the blade, sinking no deeper than an inch, along where the animal's backbone, now split in 2, once united and divided the animal. As he reached the hog's midsection, streams of blood began issuing from some unseen wellspring, pooling in one side of the curved rib cage. This pig had been alive earlier this morning. Sweat dripped from the tip of Seiler's nose and forehead, commingling with the blood. He grabbed a trotter, and concentrating on his knife work, biting his tongue between teeth and lips, he rotated the blade around the midpoint of the hog's 4 feet, marking superficial circular incisions into the skin. Ronnie Hampton re-entered the scene, his black-gloved right hand holding a reciprocating saw. He had Seiler's 5-year-old son in tow. This was the exact moment young Gabriel came to see. As his father held down the hog's bottom half, Hampton began grinding away at the front left trotter. The saw spat out bone, blood, and sinew. Gabriel skipped around the truck, screaming, laughing, delighting in the joy of another pig getting made ready for the pit. He stopped to tell me, taking the lollipop from his mouth, that he could not wait until he was big and strong enough to lift a hog. The saw and the meat, combined with the promise of smoke and fire, did more than excite a version of Southern exoticism within me. These rituals unlocked a deeply held memory. I was instantly and quite uncomfortably put in mind of my mother, who, in one of my earliest recollections, I can see slashing through a short loin with an electric bandsaw. Her thriving steakhouse, this was before the days of prepackaged, cryovac steaks, cut the following day's quota of New York strips, fillets, and ribeyes. When any given employee became a no-show, my mom took up his position, even if that meant being the butcher. It was brutal, violent work, not maternal in the least. The next 15 minutes went by in the blur and whine of the saw blade. By the time Gabriel had stopped reveling in the rendering of pig flesh, 12 disembodied trotters stood macabrely piled in the truck's bed. I was sickened. I was thrilled. I was hungry. I walked inside to order a barbecue sandwich. The dining room of Seiler's was a jumble of Southern stereotypes, minus the rusted tin sign advertisements, worn farm equipment, and other vintage bric-a-brac that define the Cracker Barrel aesthetic. There were stacks of Wonder Bread buns piled high along the painted cinder block walls, a plastic plant in each corner, and squeeze bottles full of barbecue sauce on every table. On the walls, inspirational Christian curios mingled with pig iconography and family photographs. The 10 Commandments hung over the cash register. Most of the clientele had long passed the minimum AARP age, but that would be appropriate, as Seiler's Old-Time Barbecue was Henderson, Tennessee's last authentic barbecue joint, and one of the last surviving wood-cooked whole hog pit houses in the entire South. I paid for my barbecue sandwich and took a seat at the table, brushing a sesame seed from the red gingham-clothed table. My sandwich appeared as a grease-slicked, wax-papered parcel speared with a toothpick. I unwrapped the barbecue bundle to find a rather sad-looking plain white hamburger bun leaking what appeared to be ketchup. Disappointed by what aesthetically amounted to fast food rubbish, I rotated the wax paper clockwise to get a look at the sandwich's backside. There, teasingly poking through the 2 halves of bread, was a single sly tendril of meat. Tossing the top bun aside, I uncovered a baseball-sized mound of mixed white and dark pork, thick, ropey strands of alabaster flesh curling serpentine around chunks of smoke-stained shoulder, some pieces of which still contained black-charred bits of skin. It was all smothered in a heavily pepper-flecked coleslaw containing little else but chopped cabbage and ketchup. Using my hands, I started forking the meat into my mouth. Each bite seemed to reveal a different part of the pig. I could discern, with tongue and teeth, the textural differences between the soft, unctuous belly meat and the firm, almost jerky-dry shoulder. The slaw added softly alternating rushes of sweet and heat to each smoke-tinged taste. In Memphis, I had eaten barbecue more times than I'd like to count, but this was the first time I truly tasted barbecue. Every bite transported me to a South I partially recognized but had never really known. A porky place, a swine-swilled space, a region where barbecue was ever so much more than just the meat, as the Southern historian and journalist John Egerton once penned. I was tasting history, culture, ritual, and race. I was eating the South and all its exceptionalities, commonalities, and horrors, a whole litany of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Everything I loathed and everything I loved about the region I called home. This was not just barbecue. This was place cooked with wood and fire. As I took another bite, while rolling this possible connection over in my mind, Chris Seiler joined me at the table. "I've been doing barbecue for a few years now," he announced by way of introduction, but also a testament to his expertise. He warned me that he talked too much, which he proceeded to do, not that I minded. He grew up in the type of Southern town where you know your history and won't ever forget your last name. Seilerton, the smallest incorporated town in Hardeman County, little more than a farm hamlet of 100 or so residents, where, as he described, they're all kin to me one way or another. It was in those lean years following the Civil War that two sets of 4 brothers, 8 Siler men and their accompanying Siler families, set out from Siler City, North Carolina, to resettle in the timber forests east of Memphis. They followed a previous generation of Carolinians who had trekked to west central Tennessee following Andrew Jackson's Native American removal policy. There, Silers begat more Silers. Eventually, the Gulf, Mobile, and Northern Railroad showed up, hungry for hardwood lumber. But it didn't take long for the timber trade to dry up. The woodlands laid bare. The Silers traded forestry for hog and cattle farming. Chris Siler was not born on a farm, he made sure to emphasize, but in between farms. His father long ago left the family trade to open an auto body shop in the nearby town of Bolivar, but still felt it important to expose the young Siler to the farm life, or as he termed it, to lease out his son. He'd pasture the cattle, separating calf from cow, keeping the land evenly grazed. For 2 weeks each winter he'd have to clean out the dairy barn, the really nasty downside of it all. The dividends from working on his uncle's hog farm far outweighed those of the dairy. In the fall they would slaughter a hog. The hind legs would be sugar-cured and hung in the family's old-fashioned smokehouse. Honey hams for next year's holiday season. The hand-crank grinder took care of the rest. They would line me and my cousins up, and every one of them would take a turn until their arm gave out. 2 to 3 days were spent grinding the shoulders, loin, and belly, spicing the meat with red pepper, stuffing casings, and forming homemade sausage links. The whole time during our interview he exuded a buzz of boundless, youthful energy, politely excusing himself from the table to greet customers, fix sandwiches, herd his 2 young children away from my tape recorder, and warmly direct his employees. He appeared able to do all these duties and more within just a minute's time. This energy was matched with a serene religiosity. He hinted at a trouble-filled past, drugs, alcohol, and a born-again redemption. Now 33 years old with a family and a business, he felt imbued with a purpose to serve barbecue and thanked the Lord every day for the opportunity. After I finished my sandwich, he jumped up to grab me a taste of what he called a happy accident, his latest experiment in sauce-making. He returned holding a square tray laden with a pair of massive, fatty, meaty pork ribs. I had a goal when we opened up that I was going to change the ribs. I wanted something that would make our ribs stand out where it would be something that people would want more. Instead of just going back to using our regular sauce, I just decided one day I was going to get back here in the back and take a mixing bucket and see what happened. He started throwing ingredients in his plastic bucket. Spices, vinegar, those elements found in a traditional barbecue sauce. Because sauces in West Tennessee are sugary, he needed some nectar. He wanted something different but familiar, a punch of sweetness that embodied this place and himself. Instead of reaching for the jug of corn syrup from Piggly Wiggly, the staple cheap sweetener for barbecue sauces across the nation, he sent an employee to C&R Grocery, the little country store and gas station across the street, to fetch a gallon of locally produced sorghum molasses. When I got done, I had something that I really liked, and I cooked a rack of ribs and gave it away as samples, and, we had people standing at the counter sucking on the bone. Rib sales had nearly doubled since he changed the sauce recipe. Golden lacquered, with meat separating from bone, the ribs looked so sticky I got the feeling that if I looked at them too hard, my eyes would cement shut. They emanated a multidimensional perfume of rich sugars and that earthy medicinal funk common to sweet sorghum. This was not the syrup some Southerners drizzle on their morning griddle cakes, according to Siler, but an industrial-strength molasses colored nearly black, very, very, very dark, too dark and too thick to sell by itself. At room temperature, it's almost solid. This guy, these ribs, are going to be famous, I thought to myself. This approach, taking a locally sourced historical ingredient and pairing it with a conventional recipe, went beyond ordinary barbecue. This was some chefy, Culinary Institute of America trained forward-type thinking, without any hint of trend surfing. It's very expensive to make because of the sorghum, Siler said. They make a year's supply in the month of September. Now I'm out, and I've done run the country store across the road out, so I'm trying to get a hold of them to see if they had any leftovers still put up. Just in case, I swiped my finger across the surface of the paper tray until I had licked the plate clean. Siler led me back outside. On the path to the smokehouse, he nodded toward his pitmaster, the man he referred to as his full-time cook, and sighed, "I wish I could find a way to pay him more." Ronnie Hampton sat in quiet repose on an upturned tree stump, staring at a boisterous fire, smoking a cigarette. 2 rows of waist-high cinder block formed pits lined each side of the building. Siler lifted up a thick black plastic tarp that covered a sheet of metal corrugated roofing material, together acting as the pit's makeshift lid. He then delicately removed 3 stacked cinder blocks, one by one, like dislodging oversized pieces from a game of Jenga to reveal a bed of coals. The sinuous aroma of pork filled the structure, mixing with the sound of dripping fat sizzling on coals. He crouched down to show me how the hogs rested skin side up on a metal grate welded together to resemble a slatted bed frame of sorts, hovering over the fire. He pointed to 4 shovels leaning against the wall, the pitmasters' tools of the trade. Siler explained that well before loading the hogs onto the pits, Hampton had, using a mixture of hickory and oak wood for fuel, started a pair of fires in 2 overturned oil drums, burn barrels, just outside. Then, with the hardwoods burned down to charcoal, the pitmaster had spread a bed of cinders on the floor of each pit. His work really swung into gear with the hogs finally loaded in. Over the first hour and a half, he fired the hogs every 30 minutes. Then he shoveled load after load of coals every 45 minutes until the fat started dripping, and every hour after. The entire smoking process took 24 hours. "Here in Chester County, this was the way everybody has always done it," Siler said with pride. "Sticking with the old way, people like that." Chester County was the perfect location for a whole hog barbecue culture to develop. It was a place where we were only completing the work that our fathers had begun. We had just one money crop, cotton, as local memoirist S.E. Reed characterized the agriculturally focused existence of area residents during the late 19th century. "We didn't make much of a living," he wrote. "We just breathed." A tiny rural farming community surrounded by even smaller agricultural outposts, like Silerton, located a dozen or so miles to the southwest, the town of Henderson acted as the county's central hub, a locus where farm families could gather, eat, celebrate, and just breathe. And there was not a more natural place to breathe the sweetly loamy Tennessee air, no finer spot to get off the farm without escaping the farm, than this grove of hickory and oak trees off a bend on the rural highway. This was getting out of the country to get into more country. Here, stretching back over 150 years, according to Siler, farm families, sometimes more than 1,000 individuals, converged to smoke hogs over hardwood coals in earth-dug pits. Most of the attendees of these weekend barbecue jubilees were kinfolk by blood or marriage. The men stayed up, restlessly talking, carousing, past midnight and into the morning, shoveling fire. 50-gallon cast-iron kettle pots brightly simmered with sauce. The next day they would feast under a pavilion while enjoying the fruits of their labor. "You hear people tell stories of things like that," Siler said. "I just have heard people talk about when they used to cook here." These are the stories that still circulate over chopped barbecue sandwiches among old-timers here, the unrecorded history of Henderson and Chester County, the legend that informs the name of the restaurant, Old Time Barbecue. In the real old times, way before old time, a real brick-and-mortar restaurant was eventually built in the hickory and oak grove. Established in the 1960s, Noble's Barbecue reputedly would sell on average 60 to 80 whole hogs a week. After tracking down Pat Nobles-Jones, the niece of founders Glenn and Dorothy Nobles, to glean a bit of the long-shuttered restaurant's history, she told me, "Everything's different, hon. Everybody's dead." She pronounced this last word with 3 syllables, dead, as if to emphasize just how very dead everybody was. "You could have gotten lots and lots of information from them." I had arrived too late. "Honey," she told me, "that's almost a thing of the past." Almost. But with a little prodding, everyone, I have found, has a barbecue story. To paraphrase Faulkner, barbecue's past is never
Sample complete. Ready to continue?